Daphne du Maurier was one of the great writers, not just of Gothic fiction, but in the entire Western canon. She was such a master craftsman when it comes to creating intricate stories full of complex characters, dripping with mood, atmosphere, and often terror, that Alfred Hitchcock adapted 2 of her stories into beloved films. One of those being Rebecca, which we're going to talk about today. What is it exactly that makes Rebecca a perfect novel? And it is, in my opinion, a perfect novel. I just finished rereading it, and it doesn't just hold up. Rebecca only gets better as a work of fiction, the more time you spend with it, the more you learn to appreciate it. And we need to talk about how and why that is, and I've got a lot to say. But first, let me tell you a story. Fans of my channel will know that I am hounded by a villain named Lampington Jones. But what you may not know is the origin of Lampington Jones himself. And it's a sad story. The story of a man who created his own little empire of reading lamps. He built a brand around himself, a brand called Lampington Lamps. These were reading lights designed to comfort and enhance the reading experience of voracious bookworms like you and me. But sadly, the reading lamps that he built were cursed. They stole the souls of those who used them. And now Lampington Jones, well, he wanders the world, going after readers like myself who read by the light of things as beautiful as this right here, this serious light. He's jealous, he's angry, he's miserable, and he wants to steal the light from every bookworm in the world. Bookworms like me whose lives are enhanced by the power, the glow, the warmth of a serious light, which is why I am so grateful that this video is sponsored by Serious Readers, a company that don't steal people's souls, who in fact create wonderful lights that enhance our reading experience and provide us with a suitably atmospheric glow by which to tell scary stories about bitter and twisted men who try to steal the light from us. Lampington Jones, my great nemesis, I have so much pity for you. But my pity is dwarfed by the love that I have for my serious light. Every single evening as the sun sets, I curl up at the end of my sofa or in my armchair, and standing between those bits of furniture, swinging back and forth as she's needed, is my serious light, my companion, who enhances my reading experience in a way that I will forever be grateful for. With her shifting beam and her dimmer switch, she provides me with everything I need for the perfect reading experience, building a little bubble of light around me and whatever book I'm currently lost in. Lampington Jones could never understand the power of serious lights, but I do. And if you want £150 off your own serious light, click the link in the description, pick your own serious light, and use the offer code WILLOW at checkout. Thank you so much to Serious Readers for my serious light, for helping me keep Lampington Jones at bay, and for sponsoring this video. Now, since we're talking about Gothic fiction, I am of course wearing my Shirley Jackson t-shirt, which I got from Girl Parts. They did not sponsor this video, but they are amazing. And yes, of course, I'm gonna get myself a Daphne du Maurier shirt next. I'm not insane. But let's talk about Rebecca. When I realized I didn't currently have a physical copy of Rebecca, I went out and got one. However, I was very annoyed to see that the publisher have just reissued all the paperbacks, and I really don't like them, so I splurged and got this gorgeous hardcover. What I absolutely adore about this hardcover edition is that it took me to realize the word Rebecca is not written on the cover, it's just this embroidered R. There's a moment in the book where our protagonist reaches into a jacket that used to be owned by Rebecca, and she finds a beautiful lace napkin with an R embroidered into it. And putting that on the cover is so emblematic of the themes of this book, because our protagonist is, in one way or another, haunted by Rebecca. And so having Rebecca actually stitched into the fabric of the book itself is so smart. Just in case you're watching this and you're not not familiar with Rebecca, Rebecca is a Gothic novel by Daphne du Maurier that was written in and set in the 1930s. We begin in Monte Carlo with our first-person, nameless protagonist. She is simply referred to as Mrs. De Winter, although when we first meet her, she isn't Mrs. De Winter, not yet. She's a young woman who was hired by an elderly American woman to be her companion. They've been traveling around Europe and they'll be off to New York soon. And while they're in Monte Carlo, just seeing the sights, the old woman spots Maximilian de Winter, an Englishman of renown, a man from a legendary family. Old money. This traditional English gentleman lives in a great, big, beautiful house in Cornwall. The house is called Manderley, and it sits at the edge of a cliff, and it's one of the great stately homes of England. The old woman tells our protagonist about Maxim de Winter, about how he was married and his wife tragically died a year ago. His late wife was the titular Rebecca, and after the old woman strikes up a conversation with Maxim, he takes an interest in our protagonist. They spend a few days getting to know each other, and on the morning that she's about to leave for New York, she says to him, "I wanted to say goodbye before I left because these last few days have meant a lot to me." And he says, "You don't want to go to New York. You want to stay with me. So come home to Manderley and be my wife." It's not exactly a romantic gesture, but she also doesn't want to say no. She believes herself in love with him. As the proposal scene goes on, you get a fantastic sense of what kind of a man Maxim de Winter is. And there's this wonderful paragraph here. "I drummed with my fingers on the table, uncertain of myself and of him. Was he still laughing at me? Was it all a joke?" He looked up and saw the anxiety on my face. "I'm being rather a brute to you, aren't I?" he said. "This isn't your idea of a proposal. We ought to be in a conservatory, you in a white frock with a rose in your hand and a violin playing a waltz in the distance. And I should make violent love to you behind a palm tree. You would then feel you were getting your money's worth. Poor darling, what a shame. Never mind. I'll take you to Venice for our honeymoon and we'll hold hands in a gondola. But we won't stay too long because I want to show you Manderley." He wanted to show me Manderley, and suddenly I realized that it would all happen. I would be his wife. We would walk in the garden together. We would stroll down the path in the valley to the shingle beach. I knew how I would stand on the steps after breakfast, looking at the day, throwing crumbs to the birds, and later wander out in a shady hat with long scissors in my hand and cut flowers for the house. I knew now why I had bought that picture postcard as a child. It was a premonition, a blank step into the future. And all the while he ate his tangerine, giving me a piece now and then, and watching me. We would be in a crowd of people and he would say, "I don't think you've met my wife." Mrs. De Winter. I would be Mrs. De Winter. I considered my name and the signature on the checks to tradesmen and in letters asking people to dinner. I heard myself talking on the telephone. "Why not come down to Manderley next weekend?" People, always a throng of people. "Oh, but she's simply charming. You must meet her." This about me, a whisper on the fringe of a crowd, and I would turn away pretending I had not heard. Going down to the lodge with a bucket on my arm, grapes and peaches for the old lady who was sick, her hand stretched out to me. "The Lord bless you, madam, for being so good." And me saying, "Just send up to the house for anything you want. Mrs. De Winter." I would be Mrs. De Winter. I saw the polished table in the dining room and the long candles. Maxim sitting at the end. A party of 24. I had a flower in my hair. Everyone looked towards me, holding up his glass. "We must drink the health of the bride." And Maxim saying afterwards, "I have never seen you look so lovely." Great cool rooms filled with flowers, my bedroom with a fire in the winter, someone knocking at the door, and a woman comes in, smiling. She is Maxim's sister, and she says, "It's really wonderful how happy you have made him. Everyone is so pleased. You are such a success, Mrs. De Winter." I would be Mrs. De Winter. And then the next line. "The rest of the tangerine is so sour. "I shouldn't eat it," he said, and I stared at him, the words going slowly to my head, then looked down at the fruit on my plate. The quarter was hard and pale. He was right. The tangerine was very sour. I had a sharp, bitter taste in my mouth, and I had only just noticed it. That small paragraph, after everything else that I just read, is incredible foreshadowing of the way in which everything is going to crumble. The rest of the tangerine is so sour. And all of this comes after the most famous opening chapter of maybe any book ever. Certainly the opening line, a line that everybody knows. Say it with me. Last night I dreamt I went to Manderley again. And in that dream, she returns to Manderley years after leaving it for some reason we don't know. And the Manderley she returns to in her dream is overgrown with vines. Nature has taken it back. It is a hollowed out shell that she wanders around. What happens between now and then? The tangerine is sour. So once our protagonist, the second Mrs. De Winter, returns to Manderley with Maxim, she is now the lady of the house. And everything is a little bit weird because the house is haunted by Rebecca. But I need to be clear here. This is not a haunted house story. There are no ghosts in Rebecca. But that doesn't mean that Rebecca doesn't haunt the book. Half the genius of this thing is naming the book Rebecca, a character who is dead. A character we never meet, and yet she is so alive in the pages of the book because she haunts everyone and everything. Throughout the first half of the book, once she arrives at Manderley, our protagonist must wrangle with the remains of Rebecca, how she still lives on in the minds and memories and emotions of the characters that she meets, specifically the staff at the house. And most famously out of all these characters is Mrs. Danvers. Mrs. Danvers came to the house with Rebecca. She was her maid. She basically raised her. She is a key component in the running of the house. For the past year, she has run the house basically by herself, and she mourns Rebecca so deeply. Our protagonist can feel an animosity towards her just emanating off of Mrs. Danvers. She talks so lovingly about Rebecca while being very reserved, very straight-laced, standing tall and stiff and professional and saying, yes, she was wonderful, she was lovely, etc., etc. But you can tell there's more beneath the surface. Daphne du Maurier does so much with so little. We get such a clear image of Mrs. Danvers swallowing down all of what she's really feeling about Rebecca, about Maxim, and about the second Mrs. De Winter. And as the book goes on, more and more is revealed about Mrs. Danvers and her relationship to Rebecca. Now, when I first read this book, I read it pretty much as it was presented in a very surface level way. But having learned since then that Daphne du Maurier was bisexual, and she played around a lot with gender, and she often used to remark on how she wished she could be a boy, I see a lot more queerness in the book. And the homoerotic tension between Mrs. Danvers and the deceased Rebecca is enormously palpable. Mrs. Danvers all but talks about how Maxim never knew how lucky he was to have Rebecca, a woman that Mrs. Danvers understood the true beauty of, the true genius of. That Rebecca was larger than life and nobody saw it like she did. Yes, Rebecca was massively popular. She was so charming. She had everyone wrapped around her fingers. But Mrs. Danvers went even beyond that because she wasn't wrapped around Rebecca's finger. She saw the puppetry of Rebecca. So surely she wasn't caught in Rebecca's net if she could see the net, right? She knew the tricks, so she would never fall for them. But I'm getting ahead of myself. If you haven't read the book, everything I'm saying right now probably sounds a little bit strange. So, as the first half of the novel goes on, our protagonist feels as though she is haunted by Rebecca and that she has shoes that she simply cannot fill. She starts to doubt how much Maxim could possibly love her compared to Rebecca. He must miss her so. He doesn't like to talk about her. He never ever says her name because it's clearly too painful. She only died a year ago. It is so fresh. The poor woman drowned. She used to take a little sailing boat just off the dock at the beach by the house. And one day she drowned and her body washed up miles away and Maxim had to identify it himself. The man has gone through so much trauma and heartache. He is mourning her, but he has chosen our protagonist as his second wife. She's half his age. This isn't right. The poor woman's in her early 20s and him in his 40s. It's off. What is wrong with him? Is this some sort of rebound thing? Although, of course, nothing like that is ever mentioned. And our protagonist tells herself how much she loves him and how she needs to make him happy, but she knows that she cannot be Rebecca. And on page 132, you get the best physical manifestation of not only the way in which our protagonist cannot measure up to Rebecca, but also how Rebecca haunts her, enshrouds her, dwarfs her, and overshadows her in every conceivable way. When our protagonist puts on a coat, a Macintosh, that was owned by Rebecca, and nobody has touched it or worn it since Rebecca died. My fingers were messy with the butter from the crumpet, and I felt in my pocket for a handkerchief. I drew it out, a tiny scrap of a thing, lace-edged. I stared at it, frowning, for it was not mine. I remembered then that Frith had picked it up from the stone floor of the hall. It must have fallen out of the pocket in the Macintosh. I turned it over in my hand. It was grubby. Little bits of fluff from the pocket clung to it. It must have been in the Macintosh pocket for a long time. There was a monogram in the corner, a tall, sloping R, with the letters DW interlaced. The R dwarfed the other letters. The tail of it ran down into the cambric, away from the laced edge. It was only a small handkerchief, quite a scrap of a thing. It had been rolled into a ball and put away into the pocket and forgotten. I must have been the first person to put on that Macintosh since the handkerchief was used. She who had worn the coat then was tall, slim, broader than me about the shoulders, for I had found it big and overlong, and the sleeves had come below my wrists. Some of the buttons were missing. She had not bothered then to do it up. She had thrown it over her shoulders like a cape, or worn it loose, hanging open, her hands deep in the pockets. There was a pink mark upon the handkerchief, the mark of lipstick. She had rubbed her lips with the handkerchief and then rolled it into a ball and left it in the pocket. I wiped my fingers with the handkerchief, and as I did so I noticed that a dull scent clung about it still. A scent I recognized, a scent I knew. I shut my eyes and tried to remember. It was something elusive, something faint and fragrant that I could not name. I had breathed it before, touched it surely, that very afternoon. And then I knew that the vanished scent upon the handkerchief was the same as the crushed white petals of the azaleas in the Happy Valley. That description of the coat being too long, too broad, the way in which you can picture her standing small with a larger shadow of Rebecca standing over her. Stronger, more imposing, more confident, more charming. In this novel, we never learn the name of our protagonist, and yet the woman whose name is on the book is dead. Our living protagonist is more of a mystery to us than the deceased woman who haunts the novel and has her own name stamped on the cover. It is genius. And here I want to talk about the twist halfway through. If you haven't read it, well, it's up to you if you want to stick around. Here we go. Halfway through the novel, they decide to put on a ball at the house. They haven't done this since our protagonist arrived and took up her mantle as the second Mrs. De Winter. And she wants to be like Rebecca, a woman who we are told kept the house alive. There were parties every weekend. Manderley was the soul of the county. People travelled there from London and even further just to attend her incredible parties. And our protagonist tries to be like her, tries to do what Maxim must want of her. And Mrs. Danvers suggested that our protagonist wear a dress like the one in a painting in the hallway. The hallway staircase is lined with these huge portraits of who we assume to be Maxim's ancestors, his parents, grandparents, etc. The house is old, and there are all these portraits everywhere. And Mrs. Danvers points to one and says, that picture is beautiful. Go to London, go to a dressmaker, and get them to copy that dress. You'll be the talk of the party. And so she does just that. The party starts and she's late. She's getting ready. She wants to make an entrance. Halfway through the party, she appears from her room in the dress and she walks down the stairs. And instead of people cheering and going, wow, it's the dress from the painting, that huge portrait in the hall. God, you look amazing. You've brought her to life. All the things she's expecting. Instead, there are gasps and silence. And Maxim comes up to her and he's furious. He tells her to go change immediately, that she's a disgrace, an embarrassment, and she doesn't understand why. And as she goes to her room, she sees Mrs. Danvers, smiling, leering, this evil smile. She's done something terrible, and she's won, and our protagonist doesn't even understand what's going on. So what is going on? The portrait was of Rebecca, and our protagonist didn't know that. She had no idea what Rebecca even looked like, because Maxim wouldn't talk about her, because he mourns her, right? He's too shaken to talk about her, to even point out the fact that that picture is Rebecca. And then comes the second twist. Shortly after all of this happens, a boat is found, just a little ways offshore, sunk to the bottom of the seabed. Inside the cabin is a body, and the body is Rebecca. Whoever Maxim found many, many months ago was never Rebecca. So what's going on? Well, this is the biggest twist of the whole thing. So again, if you don't want to know, this changes everything. Maxim learns about the fact that the boat has been found and he seems nervous and scared and frustrated. And our protagonist says, I'm so sorry. You have to go through all of this again. Your beloved Rebecca, your late wife who you loved more than me, they found her body again, this time for real. There's going to be an inquiry. The past is going to be dug up again. I'm so sorry, my love. And he explains, no, this is terrible. You've completely misunderstood everything that has happened so far. And of course, this is because Max didn't say a word. He never loved Rebecca. He hated her. He's not been mourning her. He's been angry and he's been frustrated. And most of all, he's had a guilty conscience. Because not only is Rebecca dead, he killed her. One night, Maxim had had enough and he shot Rebecca. And he put her body on that boat, and he drilled holes into it, and it sank, and there it remained, until now. Everything changes from this moment. Not only what we understand about Maxim and Rebecca, and the house and the past and everything, but also the tone of the book. Because one of the amazing things about Rebecca is the fact that it begins in a beautiful, sunny place. A place where everyone's on vacation, a place of rich people having fun and being hedonistic. Then we return to the house, this big gothic mansion on a cliff overlooking the ocean. A place that once had parties, a place full of colour that is no longer like that. And the house is haunted by Rebecca, by the memory of her. Everyone's acting strange. The place overshadows our protagonist, and she feels small. This is a truly gothic setting, a place of claustrophobia and nightmares. And then, once all of these twists start to come out, and we reframe everything we thought we understood, it becomes a thriller. At one point, it feels like an Agatha Christie book as it becomes a courtroom drama. Maxim needs to get away with murder. And there are even more twists to come right at the end. In the final 20-30 pages of the book, there are even more twists about Rebecca, and it changes everything again. That one I'll keep to myself. If you know it, you know it, but I won't spoil the very, very end of the book. But once again, it does reframe things. And that's amazing. Rebecca isn't just a gothic novel. It also feels like a murder mystery or a thriller. It plays with genres and tone. It moves from light to gothic dark to thriller dark. Different kinds of darkness and tension and suspense. It makes you realize that there isn't just one way for a book to be dark. There isn't one kind of literary darkness, but in fact, there are many, and there are many in this book. If you ever use the phrase, "I contain multitudes," that phrase rings so true in Rebecca, a novel that contains multitudes. A work of pitch-perfect literary genius. Forgot about my coffee. Oh, it's getting cold. Aside from its themes and its tone and the way that it plays with genre, what makes Rebecca the classic that it is are the characters and the relationships between these characters. Rebecca herself, Maxim de Winter, and Mrs. Danvers are three of the most powerfully impactful and memorable characters in the entire Gothic canon. And so to finish off, I'm going to read a monologue, which is delivered from Mrs. Danvers to our protagonist. This is the moment at which Mrs. Danvers explains how much she loves Rebecca, or in her words, how wonderful Rebecca was. How our protagonist pales in comparison. It is a villain speech. But what is interesting about this book is how we define heroes and villains. Because Maxim did kill her, and yet we seem to root for him to get away with murder. Is that a good thing? Is that okay? Later in the book, Rebecca's cousin comes along, a drunk and oafish man. He's painted as a villain, like Mrs. Danvers. And yet he suspects that Maxim killed her. And he is right. We're not supposed to like him, but he hasn't said anything untrue. We just dislike him. Anyway, here's the monologue. I love this so much. It is a true Shakespearean villain's monologue. "What do I care for his suffering?" she said. "He's never cared about mine. How do you think I've liked it, watching you sit in her place, walk in her footsteps, touch the things that were hers? What do you think it's meant to me all these months, knowing that you wrote at her desk in the morning room, using the very pen that she used, speaking down the house telephone where she used to speak every morning of her life to me ever since she first came to Manderley? What do you think it means to me to hear Frith and Robert and the rest of the servants talking about you as Mrs. de Winter? Mrs. de Winter has gone out for a walk. Mrs. de Winter wants the car this afternoon at 3 o'clock. Mrs. de Winter won't be in to tea until 5 o'clock. And all the while, my Mrs. de Winter, my lady with her smile and her lovely face and brave ways, the real Mrs. de Winter, lying dead and cold and forgotten in the church crypt. If he suffers, then he deserves to suffer, marrying a young girl like you not 10 months afterwards. Well, he's paying for it now, isn't he? I've seen his face, I've seen his eyes. He's made his own hell, and there's no one but himself to thank for it. He knows she sees him. He knows she comes by night and watches him. And she doesn't come kindly. Not she. Not my lady. She was never one to stand mute and still and be wronged. "I'll see them in hell, Danny," she'd say. "I'll see them in hell first." These characters are magic. After having read this book a second time, I feel as though they live inside my soul. These people will not let me go. This book reminds me of the power of Gothic fiction, of how much I love the darkness, the depths of darkness in these characters. I could read this book over and over again every week for the rest of my life. I love Rebecca. I love her so much. And at no point in this book is she even alive. If I don't stop myself, this video will not end. There is an incredible genius to Rebecca, to Daphne du Maurier. And honestly, sometimes I find myself thinking I'm so glad the world exists so that books like this can exist in it. Which is so dramatic. I think that's why I like Gothic fiction. If you've enjoyed this video, you can show your support on Patreon. My Patreon is flourishing right now. I've had so many new patrons join my Discord, and that Discord is available to everyone from $1 a month and up. And it is such a fun space to be. I am there all the time, chatting with amazing people about diverse literature. So if you want to join, throw me $1 a month and you're there. Thank you for your love and your support. I really hope you enjoyed this video, and subscribe for books.